Howdy ho, Maplers, and welcome to Fire Poison, our 29th 250. She is our second Explorer Mage, since we're doing them in reverse order. Bishop, Fire Poison, then Ice Lightning. So I didn't want to start with the best mobber of the group and just have that tarnish my opinions of the rest going forward. But Fire Poison is done, our 29th 250, the 70% mark for 10k Legion. Fire Poison was actually surprisingly fun. It was carried a little bit by event stats. My Explorer Mages seems to have this blessing going on for them. My Bishop was carried by Celestial Surge, Fire Poison was carried by Neo Force and the Goo Island skill tree, so they do have a little leg up where they really shouldn't, but even without those bonus stats, I think my opinion of Fire Poison would remain almost entirely the same. It's a fairly good class. For the gear, everything is about the same as usual. Meso accessories, since I'm going to be training to 250, I might as well make up some of the cost of leveling these 250s. Nothing too outrageous, except for of course the weapon and the shield. Those more than carry their weight for my mages, and the weapon itself is going to be super handy in the future for Lala's release. Going to be really nice. For the earrings, I just completely forgot to grab my superior earrings, so I just leveled to 250 with my placeholder Starforce Decidus earrings, but Fire Poison is fairly strong, even without the superior stats. Didn't really miss out on too much damage. The only thing I was missing out on was 20% Mesa, which would have been nice, but not entirely necessary. For the inner ability, pretty much like most of the Explorer Mages, ideally you want a prime line of attack speed, then a secondary line of 38% buff duration. Because this is an Explorer, it has Infinity, and Infinity is super overpowered. So you want to have that up as much as possible, and then for a third line, ideally you want like damage to debuff enemies or something. But I just happened to roll into like the perfect mule leveling inner ability, so I just rocked it because bonus drop rate, bonus meso, perfect stats for me. For the V Matrix, Fire Poison's a little bit of a complex lady. She does have a lot of boosts, but I've listed them out in terms of priority. But before that, of course, in the first spot, Decent Holy Symbol. By far the most important skill you get when you get to 5th job. You always want it on, even at level 1, level 30. It's amazing, best in slot. Couldn't ask for more. And before the boost nodes, I'm actually going to go into Fire Poison's 5th job skills, because for Fire Poison, pretty much exclusively, your 5th job skills are more important than your boost nodes. At least 3 of them, because for Fire Poison, your only good mobbing skills are your 5th job skills. And they're not really even designed to be mobbing skills, they just happen to work out that way. So, off the bat, Dot Punisher. This is Fire Poison's bread and butter. This is the skill that makes Fire Poison's burst as big as it is. And it's only on a 25-second cooldown as well, so you're going to be using this thing quite a bit. This thing doesn't necessarily mob too well. It has a maximum amount of mobs killed by the orbs, which is 15, because the orbs don't hit multiple mobs. However, the mobs hit by this ability will trigger Ignite stacks, which is one of your toggles. And Ignite stacks, especially in the lower level areas if you're fairly funded, will be making up a lot of mobbing. So the Ignite stacks you get out of this, mixed with the mobs this is killing naturally, this is a pretty darn handy skill for mobbing. As well, these little Dot Punisher orbs, they stick around for quite a while, so if there are no mobs for it to kill, they're not just going to poof out of existence. They'll hover there for quite a while. They'll just wait patiently for the next wave of spawn and then go seek those out. Super duper incredible skill for bossing. Fairly okay for mobbing. And your second skill? Poison Nova. This one is significantly better for mobbing because it doesn't really have a max mobs hit. It's just as it slowly blossoms out from your character, it'll just kill more and more mobs the farther out it goes. And then after the orbs change color, you can use Mist Eruption to then explode all of the balls for another layer of mobbing. It's kind of awkward because they start to fizzle and disappear at their max range before like the next wave of mobs spawns, so getting that Mist Eruption for the bonus mobbing is kind of hit or miss. It feels really good when you get it, but it's not something you're going to get consistently. Especially if you're on lower spawn speeds. On Frenzy it's tricky because just this thing moving out is slow enough to get through 2 waves of spawn, but it's not slow enough that by the 3rd wave of spawn they're still around to explode, or at least not enough of them are around to explode to make the most out of the mobbing. It does really good damage, and this is pretty much your best mobbing skill. As weird as that seems, a 25-second cooldown is your best mobbing skill, but it does a lot for your mobbing. For bossing, it's good damage. Again, you can explode all of the orbs, and if it's hit by multiple orbs, they do reduce damage, but it's still gonna add up to a lot of damage if you can pop this with a bunch of orbs overlapping on a boss. Obviously that has a problem. Since the orbs move out away from you, they get farther away from each other. If you're fighting a smaller boss, you're not going to get as much damage as, say, fighting a ginormous boss like Black Mage, where you can have a lot of these little orbs stacked on top of him when you blow him up, but the damage is still good regardless. Super handy skill. Probably throw it on ASAP, just like all of these top row skills. You pretty much need them the second you hit 5th job. The class feels way worse without them. And then my favorite skill, and also my least favorite skill because of one very annoying bug. I don't even think it's a bug, it's just an unlucky happenstance of the class. Poison Chain, their newest 5th job skill. This skill just conceptually rings with me. I love it. You hit 2 mobs, or I guess it's 1 mob, but it always seems like it triggers on 2 right off the bat. And then as the poison deals damage to those mobs, the poison spreads to a bunch of targets around those mobs. So it just consistently hits damage and just keeps spreading throughout the map, killing mobs as it goes. It's really, really good for mobbing when it works. The main problem with this skill, if the mob it initially jumps to dies before Poison Chain does damage to it, Poison Chain completely fizzles. It does not bounce, it doesn't continue, it goes on cooldown, it's just gone. And that's so horrible for the feel of this class. It's actually horrendous how annoying it is and how common it is, because one of your main toggle abilities, Flame Aura, kills mobs at like every 2.5, 3 seconds. It checks for mobs to hit, and if you just don't wait for Flame Aura to hit mobs first, or you just forget, Flame Aura will kill the mob this jumps to originally before Poison Chain gets a chance to do damage and start bouncing itself. It feels horrible, because when this thing can go off, it can kill 22 mobs on a single cast. Like, this skill mixed with Flame Aura when they're both working together can pretty much hold the map on Frenzied Spawn for 2 wave cycles, or 2 spawn cycles rather, because this will kill mobs above you, Flame Aura will kill mobs below you, and it works out wonderfully. The problem is, it's like an oil fire mixing the 2 skills together because they just don't want to work together. I had far too many instances where I'd cast the skill and it would just instantaneously fizzle because Flame Haze killed the mob it jumped to. It feels awful. So maybe that's something to look out for the Explorer rebalancing, but it's kind of like a niche interaction that's really only a problem for small maps. So probably not. It'll just be something you have to remember to deal with as a fire poison. And then, of course, their 4th V skill. The one at the very bottom, the least important one. I didn't really throw it on unless I was doing Dojo, because it doesn't help mobbing all too much. Elemental Fury. This is your burst on top of burst ability. The more stacks of damage over time you have will give you more stacks of your passive Fervent Drain, and the more stacks of that you have, the longer Elemental Fury lasts. So the ideal point to use this is when you're setting up for a full burst with Dot Punisher. Just before you press Dot Punisher, set down Elemental Fury so that you have maximum stacks of Fervent Drain so that this lasts as long as it can. It does a bunch of damage. It's ginormous too, so it's usually not gonna miss anything in Dojo even if stuff's teleporting around. It's really handy. But for mobbing, eh, it's not that incredible. It's like, you could throw it down for 3 to 4 seconds of mobbing, but that's not really enough time to get any good looting out. It can clear a big swath of the map because it attacks really quickly and it hits 12 mobs per little check of damage, but I just didn't really find it all that useful. It's like, for me, having my boost nodes on was much more important early on, and then as I kept leveling, getting my decent sharp eyes, my will skill, my character building boost node, those were just more impactful to my EXP rates than Elemental Fury was. This would probably be something you throw on way later for mobbing, probably 250 plus, because up to 250 I really didn't have a need for it or a reason to put it in before anything else. And now the boost nodes, in order from most important to least important. Your first trio, ideally, Mist Eruption, Ignite, and Paralyze. Those are your bread and butter skills. That's your entire bossing kit, as well as some mobbing. Paralyze can be used to mob. I think it's one of the worst mobbing skills in the game. It's super short ranged and it's got a long clunky animation. Doesn't feel great. Mist Eruption is your main damaging ability and it can be used for mobbing. It's not great for mobbing on Frenzied Spawn. On like Kishin speed or slower, it's pretty nice. But setting up Poison Mist and using Mist Eruption just doesn't feel that good on Frenzied Spawn. So this is mostly just for your bossing damage. And then your second trio, Inferno Aura, Teleport Mastery, and Flame Haze. These are pretty much your supplementary mobbing skills, except for Inferno Aura. Inferno Aura is a large part of your mobbing on Frenzied Spawn Speed. Exclusively Frenzied Spawn Speed. Because things respawn so quickly, Fire Poison doesn't really have the tools to keep up with that many mobs, so Inferno Aura has to pick up more than its fair share of slack in the mobbing department, so maybe in reg servers, if you're a Fire Poison, prioritize Inferno Aura earlier, but then you fall into the trap. Inferno Aura is not that incredibly strong of an ability, so having this one-shot isn't the easiest thing in the world. So it's in that awkward spot of super important but not so important. And then there's Teleport Mastery, which is just strictly supplementary mobbing. Just while you're teleporting around, it'll tag mobs and kill them. Decent damage. Flame Haze is pretty much just for bossing. It can have some niche use for mobbing to like put a poison mist cloud farther away from your character, but it's really not that handy. It's mainly just for bossing. It does a decent amount of damage, and then it sets a poison cloud on whatever it hits, or if it misses a mob, it just places a poison cloud on you. Has niche uses, but it's not super important for mobbing. And your final trio, Meteor Shower, Ifrit, and Megiddo Flame. This is the least important one because Ifrit isn't gonna be helping your mobbing all that much. The mobs that Ifrit would naturally hit are already going to be tagged by your other AoEs and Flame Aura. Megiddo Flame is strictly bossing, and then Meteor Shower, it does enough damage unboosted in most cases that it'll be able to still help you with mobbing. It's more so just to have that extra damage and oomph behind the passive while it's on cooldown to get that extra hit of damage for bossing. And then of course, decent sharp eyes, bonus crit rate, everyone wants it, bonus crit damage, everyone needs it. True Arachnid Reflection, you get this for completing the Will storyline. Bonus mobbing, bonus damage. Not the greatest at either, but hey, it's free. Might as well throw it on if you get it, right? And then Rope Lift. Fire Poison needs Rope Lift, like, really badly. If you're on a map with any form of verticality to it, Fire Poison struggles, dude. Like, this class doesn't have a Teleport Mastery increase at all. They are literally rocking the lowest of low base Explorer teleport range. Like, Bishop has their bossing form for improved teleport. Ice Lightning has teleport masteries, hyper passive to give them bonus range. Fire Poison ain't got diddly squat. You're just stuck rocking that base little dinky teleport range. At least you can jump and teleport up, but that's still not that much of a distance increase, so Rope Lift is pretty vital for those tall maps. And then this last spot would have just been Character Building 1, which expired this morning. So, for the bossing, or for the mobbing rather, Fire Poison is kind of awkward.
Also, good lord, this class has a lot of toggles. If you ever DC, you got 5 toggles to turn on and then rebuff. It's a little bit awkward. This class is definitely not designed to be a mobber. It's definitely not designed to be a mobber on Frenzied Spawn. This is definitely one of those CLP gamer type classes. Small maps are your friend because Fire Poison does not have the mobility to mob these larger maps. And for 200 until 205, honestly, I'm not a fan of the Vanishing Journey maps. I really don't like how they feel on Fire Poison. Alternatively, you could do Fez 2. It's pretty much in the same level range, but Fez 2 is usually a lot more popular. So my recommendation for 200 to 205 is the Fox Treetop Path. This map is kind of long, but for Fire Poison, it's more than good enough. Since your Flame Aura will tag mobs that are below you, you just want to stick in the middle of the map, and then just cycle your 5th jobs on cooldown, using everything you got as soon as you got it. Now, Fire Poison does benefit greatly in the mobbing department by having a cooldown hat. Unfortunately, I don't have a cooldown hat for my Explorer mages, so I was just rocking the base cooldowns. And without a strong cooldown hat, there are definite gaps in your abilities to the point where you have to rely on one of your worst mobbing tools, like using Mist Eruption as a mobbing skill, for instance, where you just set up poisons and then explode them for supplementary mobbing in between your cooldowns. It doesn't feel great. Like, ideally, I'd like to have a 4 or 5 second cooldown, but that's a very, very tall task to get one of those. So you just gotta kind of live with the mediocre mobbing skills you have while your 5th job skills are on cooldown if you don't have a cooldown hat. It's not the worst thing in the world. Again, Flame Aura on Frenzied Spawn carries more than its fair share of weight. It's pretty much your main mobbing skill when everything else is on cooldown, and that'll carry you up into the Reverse City map for 205 until 215. It's the Hidden Research Train. Of course it's going to be the Hidden Research Train. Whenever I can fit a character in this map, I usually try to. The XP here is far too good to pass up on. And since you're a mage, guess what you have? Good goddarn soul damage. Emphasis on good. It's going to be one-shotting for a lot of these earlier levels because mage souls are super strong. And then for this map specifically, again, just stick in the middle of a map because Flame Aura will hit mobs below you, not above you. So you want to at least keep some mobs below you for Flame Aura to take care of. And then, as always, just cycle your cooldowns. Now, one way you can do this is to be patient with your cooldowns and wait until like residual effects expire. Like after Dot Punisher, it sets down a bunch of ignite stacks. You can then wait for those ignite stacks to disappear before you cast your next skill to like somewhat drag out the usefulness of these mobbing skills and make it so that the cooldowns are less inhibitive for your EXP rates. But in testing those rotations, it feels really awkward, and the EXP is pretty much like 80% of just actively killing mobs. It's a noticeable drop off, but it does make it so you don't have to rely on using Poison Mist intermittently with your training rotations or using Paralyze, for God's sakes. I absolutely hate Paralyze as a mobbing skill. So that's one thing you can do, just like extend the wait period between your skills to drag out their usability. Since Ignite is fairly strong, if it's 2 ticking mobs, it's enough to keep up with Frenzied spawn speed, but the problem is there's no control over where Ignite spawns. So a lot of the times Ignite will just place itself in completely irrelevant areas of the map where there just are no mobs. So it's probably better just to suffer through using Poison Mist or Paralyze intermittently to supplement your mobbing, even if it does feel pretty bad to do so. But for 215 until 218, as always, or I guess not as always, but as always going forward, with the new EXP curve, the Mushbud Forest 6, it's the place to be. 20% bonus base EXP is pretty crazy OP, and this map works out great for Fire Poison, because there's a nice little area that your poison, or you're not poison, your Flame Aura can tag mobs below you. Again, you kind of just want to sit in the middle and make sure you're tagging as many mobs as possible. This map is a bit on the longer side, so you do need to teleport quite a bit, But that's not too bad for fire poison, since you're going to be teleporting anyway to set down your poison mists to explode them, and your AoEs are sizable enough that they're going to be hitting a good portion of the map even in these larger ones. Plus, more mobs on the map means less chances for Poison Chain to completely fizzle before it bounces, which means you'll get more mobbing out of it, which is good. And these levels go by pretty quick. These maps are really good early on for Fire Poison. They're quite dense with mobs, and they have quite a bit of mobs in them, so you don't really notice how poor the mobbing abilities really are. And then for 218 until 223, it's the Hidden Iliad Field. Probably the best map in Yum Yum Island. It's super duper flexible. There are pretty much no classes that can't train here. It's very, very nice. Lucid Soul if you got her on the side, and then just place yourself far enough away from Lucid Soul since your Lucid Soul actually does damage so that she's not going to be KS'd by any of your abilities, and then just start cycling your cooldowns. Getting as many mobs as you can, try to be patient with Poison Nova, wait for spawn. If it doesn't look like it's going to line up, you can just pop it early, maybe grab a few mobs, but just cycle your cooldowns. And then in between, while Poison Chain is bouncing on mobs, that's where I usually set up my Poison Clouds, wait for the next wave of spawn, Mist Eruption, and then just cycle back into using your big AoEs to mob with. It's very, very easy. It's pretty darn relaxing to train as Fire Poison, even if the rates aren't that incredibly good. There's enough downtime between using your abilities that it's not super hectic, but there's not so much downtime that it gets super boring. It's also not a Hayato-esque class for cooldown watching. These mobbing skills have way better staying power, if that makes sense. Like one cast of Phantom Blade just kills its number of mobs and then it's over with and you have to go on to the next cooldown as a Hayato. Whereas with Fire Poison, one cast of Dot Punisher kills its waves of mobs, then the Ignite stacks kills mobs, your Flame Aura is killing mobs, and that's just all happening passively after you cast a skill. It's super duper nice. And for 223 into 230, it's the Occupied Dance Floor 2. This map just felt the best for Lachlan. You can train in Rev 3, the EXP rates are very similar, but this map had the least amount of movement, and that's a big plus in my book for Fire Poison, because she's again not the most mobile of farmers. Just set down Lucid on the house, and then you stand over here on the second platform so that your Flame Aura is able to kill as many mobs as possible, and then just cycle your cooldowns. Throw out Dot Punisher, Poison Nova, Meteor Shower, Poison Chain. Pretty much want to be using everything on cooldown. And if you don't have any other super important boost nodes, you can throw Elemental Fury on for this map. It's not the worst thing in the world. He's big enough to hit the entire map, so you can throw him down while you do a loot cycle, but he does not last long for mobbing. He really doesn't. It's hard to get stacks of Fervent Drain while you're mobbing to actually make good use out of him, but as just a supplementary ability to throw behind you when you go on loot cycles, he is an option if you don't have like a character building one or something to throw on. And this map will get you on into Arcana easy peasy. Now for 230 until 232, my recommended map is the Earth Spirits, but keep in mind this requires a Lucid Soul. Because Earth Spirits is such a long map, you're not going to be able to efficiently mob this map with just Fire Poison Space Kit. You kind of need this Lucid Soul to just carry one side of the map. For me, I just dropped her on the left side, and then sit right here in the middle where there's the biggest cluster of mobs around you. There are mobs below you for your Flame Aura, and then you just cycle your cooldowns. You kind of just ignore the left side of the map. Now that's not ideal, but if Poison Chain is good and it bounces properly, Poison Chain can get all the way over to the left side and pick up those mobs. And since the cooldown on Poison Chain is like 1 cast or 2 casts a minute, you're not really losing too many maps from the map as a whole that it's affecting your EXP rates too dramatically. Obviously it's not ideal, but the EXP rates here are still pretty darn good, which is why I recommend them. But for 232 until 235, you can stay in the Earth Spirits if you do like this map, but I would recommend Between Frost and Thunder 2. What the heck? I thought he said this map was bad. It is bad. It is bad. It does have a very low mob count, but that low mob count actually helps Fire Poison because you're not an insane mobber. Lucid Soul just on the left side, similar to where Alexander would be placed as a jet, and then just stand over here on the right side where the biggest cluster of mobs are, ideally standing on the second platform so that your flame aura has enough mobs for it to tag, and then you just cycle your cooldown. Since this is a smaller map with less mobs, you're not noticing the downtime between your cooldowns as much. Flame aura is actually able to do quite a bit of work here, and it feels really nice. And since everything is centralized around here, setting up your poison clouds and using Mist Eruption actually feels pretty good. It's only slightly better than Earth Spirits 2, which is why I say you can stay in Earth Spirits until 235, but this is an alternative. It's a lot less popular of a map, and you'll probably be able to find better burning here, so it's definitely an option. And then, like I said at the start, Fire Poison is kind of a CLP hero class. This map isn't ideal. I don't really like CLP anymore. It's too small, the mobs. There aren't that many mobs here, but it is a very simple map, and for someone with limited mobbing potential like a Fire Poison, it still has its uses. This is a very decent map for Fire Poison, because again, it's just got the perfect layout for your Flame Aura to actually do damage and kill mobs below you. It has nice platform setup so that Mist Eruption can tag 2 platforms, that's super handy, and it's just small and compact enough that all of the residual effects from your big AoE cooldown mobbing skills are actually going to help you with mobbing. Your Ignite stacks can't really ever spawn in a bad position here. You're going to be getting full effect out of those Ignite stacks from Dot Punish or from your other abilities. You're pretty much going to get the max mobs kill possible out of Poison Nova. The Ignite stacks that are spawned by Meteor Shower as well aren't going to ever spawn in bad positions. This map just works out the best for Fire Poison. Despite my disdain for CLP for all of the countless thousands of hours I've spent in this map, it is still very, very good situationally. And Fire Poison is that perfect situationally. So this map will carry you on into 242 no problem. I wouldn't recommend staying here after you get out of the mob's bonus EXP range, but there is a gap between here and Celis, because you drop out of bonus EXP range for the CLP mobs at 242, and you don't get in bonus EXP range for the mobs in Celis for PD4 until 247. Now there is a perfect map that would fit in those level ranges. Yeah, but it's MTS3. Unfortunately, we still have problems with the Spanish Mafia holding this map hostage, so I can't really recommend using it, but if in the future when you see this video, hey, maybe they finally moved on from this area, maybe we're finally free to train here for once, MTS3 would be that perfect bridge map for 242 until 247. But as it sits right now, you kind of have a choice. You can stay in CLP, and if you're not one-shotting with Flame Aura in Celis, I would recommend staying in CLP until 250. But if you are one-shotting with Flame Aura, your final best map until 250, it's my favorite map in Celis. It's PD4. And again, this map is extra good because you're a mage. What do mages have? Good soul damage. Lucid Soul is actually going to be doing some work. She's not fully one-shotting these mobs because I don't have 2 times Arcane Force, but she is 2-shotting the mobs, which is more than good enough for our purposes. We set up Lucid Soul on those top platforms to take care of those, because those mobs are really only ever going to be hit by our big AoE cooldowns and our residual mobbing effects, like Ignite stacks. And then, just like in every other training area, just cycle your cooldowns in the way that you'll hit the most amount of mobs possible. Give enough time between each cooldown for your residual mobbing effects to take their turns killing mobs, and then just keep rotating through mobs. This map, similar to CLP, is where you'll notice the biggest problem with Poison Chain fizzling, because the mobs are so close together, and because a good portion of the mobs that are within immediate range of you to be tagged by Poison Chain's initial cast are also within Flame Aura's range. There's a very high chance that Flame Aura just kills the mobs that would have Poison Chain bounce off of them before Poison Chain gets a chance to bounce off of them. But this map is actually really good, due in large part to Lucid Soul actually working here. If you don't really have good Lucid Soul damage, you could do SSS1. It's very similar to CLP. It does take more funding, and the mob level is quite a bit higher at 250, so you're not going to really ever be in that sweet spot for bonus EXP while training. but it is the simpler option that doesn't require a Lucid Soul, so it's definitely there for those people who need it. But for me, PD4 is always the way to go. If I can train in that map, I more than likely will. I like the layout. I like the mob density, especially on Frenzied Spawn. It feels really good. And so far, most classes actually are able to train there. Despite its sort of wonky layout for platforms, it can be kind of annoying to loot, but that's just part of the charm. It builds character. But that is Fire Poison's mobbing. Again, like I said in the start, this class was kind of carried by event stats. Right up until 249, we had Neo Force, which was giving bonus EXP, and for a majority of this character's existence, we had the Fruitapalooza tree from Goo Island, which was giving a bunch of temporary EXP bonuses. They're not that big individually, but they do add up together to make a significant increase in EXP for training to 250. So Fire Poison, just like Bishop, kinda cheated a little. I'm just waiting to get to Ice Lightning, and then we're gonna have another surprise good EXP event out of nowhere. And then it's just like, this is the curse I'm dealt with for explorers. They're never gonna have a proper leveling experience. They're just gonna have all the free bonus EXP possible. It's the kind of curse you wanna have. For bossing, oh boy. Remember my my like 4-minute rant on an unreliable memory from Bishop? Yeah, it's an Explorer Mage, you got unreliable memory. I still don't like this skill. I really don't. I managed to get the opposite end of the coin for once, where I just got nothing but Infinity, which made Fire Poison my second ever class for these 250s to get to floor 90 Dream Defender. And she was the lowest level class to get to floor 90 Dream Defender. But the only reason she got floor 90 in Dream Defender is because she got unreliable memory, god tier RNG, getting infinity after infinity after infinity. When this skill lines up, like all the stars align and it's your luckiest day of the year, this skill is insanely overpowered because infinity stacking is just unbelievably broken. So when it works, it's pretty darn strong. But the fact that it's purely RNG means 50% of the time, it's gonna be the opposite end of the coin, where you just never are gonna get that infinity. And using this skill on cooldown, just praying for an infinity, feels so horrendous. It's actually awful how impactful this skill is to Explorer Mage's bossing. For Dojo specifically, this skill alone could be the deciding factor of like 2 whole floors worth of difference on your Dojo runs. It's not a good mechanic. I hate how it works. I do not like this. At least for Fire Poison, you don't have the drawback of Bishop, where you can't use the skill on bossing mode, so there's a minor plus for it. You don't have one extra layer of tedium to deal with. Small bonus points, but bonus points nonetheless. But other than unreliable memory, let's pretend that doesn't exist. Fire Poison's bossing as a whole feels really good. Like, I like it a lot. It's probably my favorite mage for bossing so far. It's awkward to get into at first because its bossing is very different to most classes. Most classes, once you pop your strongest ability, you just see damage numbers right out the gates. Whereas Fire Poison's like a lot of little tiny tickles of damage for like 4 or 5 skill casts, and then just one giant sucker punch with Dot Punisher. It's really cool to just like set up itty bitty amounts of damage over time on a boss, and then just pow 90% of the E-boss's EXP with one ability. I love how it feels. It's definitely not for everyone. I can understand that. There is a level of clunk to this kind of bossing, where you have to set up so many abilities before you actually do a significant oomph of damage, but I like that oomph of damage. And with Fire Poison's low cooldowns, you're getting that damage off a lot more often than you would think. Like I said at the start, a cooldown hat makes the world of difference for Fire Poison. The better cooldown hat you have, the stronger Fire Poison is gonna be. Like, no joke. These skills aren't really naturally in the Goldilocks zone of like 10 to 20 seconds for a cooldown hat, but for Fire Poison specifically, Because these skills are your entire kit for damage, even if they're up towards 25-30 seconds cooldown, a cooldown hat is still your best friend. Even with no cooldown, you can pretty much burst with Dot Punisher twice a minute. And it's not the greatest burst in the world, because you're only ever getting full stacks of damage over times, like once every 3 casts. Because your stronger damage over times, like your Megiddo Flame for instance, have significant cooldowns on them. So you're never getting full stacks of your passive for Dot Punisher's maximum damage. But even with only half stacks, Dot Punisher is a good punch of damage. And if you have a cooldown hat, you're getting even more of those good punches of damage faster. It's super, super neat, but cooldown hats are one of the hardest things to get a hold of in the game, especially good cooldown hats. So really, that's only something for like the super endgame fire poisons. For us normies, fire poison's still really strong. I would probably wager to bet that fire poison is one of the better CRA mules in the game, if someone's looking for a class to level for that. You don't have really any super long cooldowns. There's no waiting period between bosses. You can just go, 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 and it's gonna feel good every time. Like, your only limiting factor is you don't have a class bind, so Urta Nova is unfortunately a crutch you have to deal with, but in the damage department, you're never waiting to deal damage as a fire poison. You're just constantly dealing damage, and just significant chunks of damage. Paralyze itself isn't the greatest damaging ability, but for bossing, you're not really ever prioritizing Paralyze for damage. Paralyze is more so there just as an intermittent skill while you're setting up damage over time abilities, or while you're waiting on the cooldown for Mist Eruption. Your main bossing skill, ironically, is a cooldown skill. It's Mist Eruption. This skill does way more damage than Paralyze can, so your ideal setup is Flame Haze, Mist Eruption, Paralyze while this is on cooldown, and since you hit a mob with Mist Eruption, Flame Haze will have its cooldown reset, and you just keep cycling those while you wait for cooldowns. Then hey, everything comes up, you set out Megiddo Flame, Poison Chain, Flame Haze, Paralyze, Poison Nova, throw down your Elemental Fury, Dot Punisher, and then Mist Eruption when Poison Nova is at its... what's the word for it? When it's at its explosion range. And then boom, big damage. It feels really good. It's definitely not for everyone. Fire Poison, again, has the worst baby explorer teleport range. So it's definitely not the mobilest of bossers ever, but you do have access to like Ethereal Form for extra safety. You have Blink, you have all these other safety skills. It's not the worst. For the damage, it's very, very good. And I quite enjoyed it. Doing dojo on Fire Poison is actually super fun. Even with the downside of having to spam unreliable memory on cooldown, I thoroughly enjoyed bossing with Fire Poison. The damage is pretty much always off cooldown with these low cooldowns, and it just never feels like you're waiting for anything. You can play this class very proactively for damage. Oh boy. So that's pretty much the bossing. There are some like minor problems I have with Fire Poison, but again, we're still waiting on the Explorer rebalancing and like quality of life update patch to get announced for KMST, so hopefully some of these problems will get fixed by then, but currently Paralyze and Poison Mist feel really fucking slow to cast, like absolutely horrendously slow. If you're not on attack speed 0 with these abilities, Poison Mist takes like a full 1.5 seconds to cast. You will set down, or you'll press your Poison Mist key, and you'll be able to teleport twice before your character is out of the fucking Poison Mist animation. It's so abysmally slow to set up, which is just like one of the main reasons that it feels awful to use as a mobbing skill. Which thankfully it's only a supplementary mobbing skill, but it's still something you're using enough to notice it feels really bad. Same with Paralyze. I said it before, Paralyze's range is pathetic. It is almost unusable as a mobbing skill, it's so bad. Back on Poison Mist, Mist Eruption has a big problem with MapleStory currently. It's probably due in large part to the 32-bit client we're still using, so hopefully with the 64-bit client it'll be fixed. But currently, Mist Eruption is probably one of the worst skills in the game for your frame rate. I'm not even kidding when I say if you cast this skill and it hits the max amount of mobs, you're looking at maybe 5 frames a minute. It can get pretty bad at times if you're hitting a lot of mobs at once with Mist Eruption. It's really bad. Not to mention the sound effect for Mist Eruption stacks on top of itself with more mobs hit, so it can just get unbearably loud. It sounds really nice when you're hitting it on one boss, but when you're hitting it on like 15 mobs, it is just ear-destroyingly loud. With all of the explosion sound effects overlapping, it does not sound great. What other problems do I have with this class? I mentioned cooldown hats. They are very, very, very strong for fire poison. Even in the mobbing department, not just for bossing, for mobbing, if you have a strong cooldown hat, fire poison's mobbing isn't actually that bad. Let's say you have a 5-second cooldown hat in Rig Server, which is a very, very good cooldown hat, but it's still within the realms of acquiring. 5 seconds off of these cooldowns almost completely eliminates the need for using Paralyze or Poison Mist and Eruption as intermittent mobbing skills. So really you're just cycling your big cooldowns to cover the map and letting Flame Aura and your Lucid Soul pick up the slack that those aren't tagging. If you have that cooldown hat, honestly, Fire Poison's a fairly decent mobber. The problem is, not many people are going to have that hat. So Fire Poison's mobbing really can't keep up with Frenzied spawn speed. It's not ideal. It's very mediocre. There are some instances where I would rather have been a bishop, because just teleporting in a circle with Big Bang and genuine Holy Symbol would have probably been better EXP, especially pre-200. I'd honestly say level a bishop over a fire poison. This class is absolutely horrendous to level to 200. What else? The teleport range again, it's a big problem. There is no teleport mastery improved range like there is for Ice Lightning. There's no bossing mode toggle like Bishop. You're just stuck with a dinky teleport. It doesn't feel good, but it's just one of the things you have to learn to live with for fire poison. It's not all that bad for bossing, because there aren't really any instances that I can think of where you need a super, super long teleport range, but for mobbing it feels bad that you have to teleport multiple times before you're even out of a poison cloud that you just set down. That just feels bad. If they could bump up the range so that you get at least outside of your poison mist's range with one teleport, that would be life-changing for the mobbing. But again, we're waiting on the Explorer changes to come out of KMST. Hopefully a lot of these problems are addressed, because honestly, they are sort of minor problems, but they are holding back Fire Poison from feeling like a newer class. It's definitely showing its age in some spots, and really, I only think this needs quality of life changes before it's an amazing class. I thoroughly enjoyed Fire Poison. I'm like crossing my fingers that the quality of life updates hit my main problems, and that maybe in the future a 5th V skill for Fire Poison is like another mobbing skill, because if Fire Poison gets another mobbing skill that's in like this sweet spot of 20 to 30 seconds, I think Fire Poison would be a decent mobber. So I'm crossing my fingers that's what they get, but only time will tell in that department. And that's pretty much all I gotta say on Fire Poison. I like this class a lot more than I expected I would. My experience pre-200 on Fire Poison was not a good one, but this class definitely turns over a new leaf once you get 5th job. It actually becomes a class with 5th job. But that's been Fire Poison. If you have any questions about playing a Fire Poison, about my journey to all classes 250, or about playing MapleStory in general, do ask below. I make it a point in all of these videos to answer any and all questions you guys might have. Because oh boy, I love talking about this game. I've been playing it for 17 years now, going for 17 more. Next up, we're doing Angelic Burster. It's finally time to get the channel avatar to 250.
She's been sitting pretty there as the channel icon for long enough. I think it's her time to shine. She'll be our 30th 250, marking the 75% completion mark for 10k Legion, and a little over the halfway mark for all classes 250. So that'll be pretty fun. Anyways, I'll see you next time.